Raylan awoke with a groan, his face pressed against the damp soil of the alien jungle. His head throbbed, and he could taste the bitterness of the thick, humid air. He groggily looked around, blinking at the dense, vine-covered trees towering over him. Strange, pulsating plants emitted a soft glow, casting eerie shadows across the ground. The sound of distant, unfamiliar creatures echoed, but none of that mattered right now. He had bigger problems, like the fact that he was chained to a tree. Great. Just great, he muttered to himself, rattling the chains around his wrists. They didn't give, as expected. He groaned again, louder this time, shifting his position to get a better view of his surroundings. If he was going to survive this, he needed a plan. And for now, that plan involved getting out of these damn chains. Raylan took a deep breath, pushing himself up with a grunt. He could hear rustling in the bushes nearby, but didn't have the luxury of checking. He pulled at the chains, testing their strength. You'd think someone would have figured out how to get out of these by now. I mean, come on, you leave a human in a jungle and think chains are gonna stop us? He chuckled bitterly. You really don't know humanity. After a few more frustrating minutes of tugging, the chains refused to budge. He kicked the tree in frustration. Why did I think this would be easy? He muttered, his voice dripping with sarcasm. This is exactly what I get for trusting alien overlords. His mind raced as he thought through his options. The Varkalians, whoever they were, obviously enjoyed putting humans through some sick game. But Raylan wasn't just any human. He wasn't the type to roll over and die. Not by a long shot. Just then, a soft voice broke through his thoughts. You're new. Raylan froze. His eyes darted around, searching for the source of the voice. Who's there? He called out, his voice rough from the dry air. The voice, smooth and almost melodic, responded again, but this time from behind him. Not too many survive the first few hours here, the voice said, laced with a mix of amusement and something else, something almost teasing. Raylan twisted around, his eyes catching sight of her, a tall, striking alien woman, her chains glinting in the soft glow of the jungle. She had a sharp, regal appearance with a gaze that seemed to pierce straight through him. She wasn't struggling or panicking. Instead, she was leaning casually against a tree, watching him with a smirk. Well, you've got a better chance than I do. So, what's your name? Or should I call you Mysterious Alien Lady? Raylan asked, doing his best to sound confident despite the chains still clinging to his wrists. She raised an eyebrow, clearly amused by his sarcasm. Celara. And you're Raylan, right? The human who's supposed to die today. Raylan's lips twitched into a grin. Not if I can help it, he shot back. How long have you been stuck here? Long enough to know that chains aren't the worst thing in this jungle, she said, her voice steady and cool. But they are a pain. You seem like you might be the kind of guy who's good at breaking chains, metaphorically speaking, of course. Raylan snorted. I'm good at breaking chains, hearts, and a few other things, he quipped with a wink. But I've got to start with this damn metal first. He pulled harder on the chains, but they didn't budge. Celara watched him for a moment, the smirk on her face never fading. It's not about strength. Not here. You'll need more than muscles. Raylan narrowed his eyes. Yeah? Then what's your big secret? He asked, pulling his wrists again. She tilted her head, her eyes glinting with amusement. You humans and your need for physical solutions. Sometimes it's not about breaking something, it's about making it work for you. You should be more concerned about what's coming next, anyway. Raylan was about to respond when a loud, guttural noise echoed through the jungle, making the ground vibrate beneath him. A low, hissing growl followed by the unmistakable sound of claws scraping against the earth. Celara's smirk faded as she straightened. That's the problem, she said, her tone suddenly serious. You never know who or what is watching. Raylan's heart skipped a beat as he scanned the jungle. He could hear the creatures getting closer. We've got company, huh? He said, half joking, but the tension in his voice betrayed him. You could say that, Celara replied, her voice cool and unbothered. But you won't survive out here on your own. The jungle has a way of testing you. Raylan twisted his wrists in the chains again, frustration mounting. I don't need the jungle to test me. I'm ready for whatever comes. His eyes flicked to her. You sure you're not in this for some kind of sick alien game too? Solara's lips curled up again in a knowing smile. Trust me, Raylan. You're the least of my problems. But right now, we need to focus on the real challenge, surviving the beasts. The jungle growl grew louder, and Raylan could hear the rustling of branches, as if the trees themselves were part of the hunt. Any suggestions? Because survive the beasts wasn't really in my vacation plans, he said with forced humor, his gaze darting around. Solara studied him for a moment before stepping closer. We could try breaking those chains together, she said, her voice low. But you'll need to learn more than just fighting for your life. You'll need to adapt. Raylan glanced at her, his eyes narrowing with curiosity. Adapt to what? Me, she said with a grin, her tone light but filled with a dangerous edge. If you're going to make it out of here, you'll need me more than you think. Raylan let out a small laugh, though there was no humor in his eyes. You're the one with the chains, lady, he said. But I'm open to ideas. And just like that, the tension between them shifted again. The jungle, with its deadly creatures and unpredictable dangers, was no longer the only thing they had to worry about. Raylan realized this wasn't just about escaping, it was about learning how to survive together, and maybe something more. All right, Solara, he said, his grin returning. Let's see what we can do. Together. Raylan tried to suppress the creeping sense of panic as the jungle's growls grew louder. The beast was getting closer. The jungle itself seemed alive, as if it were watching him, waiting for him to make the first move. He glanced at Solara, who was still leaning casually against the tree, seemingly unfazed by the threat. She looked at him with a mixture of curiosity and amusement, as though his obvious distress was part of the show. You seem pretty calm for someone who's about to be torn apart by some alien monster, Raylan muttered, wiping the sweat from his brow. His eyes were darting to the moving shadows between the trees, trying to gauge where the threat was coming from. I've been here longer than you, Solara replied coolly. You're more likely to be killed by your own stupidity than by anything in this jungle. Raylan's mouth opened to retort, but a massive shape suddenly emerged from the underbrush. His heart stopped in his chest as the beast appeared, a grotesque, spider-like creature with dozens of glowing red eyes and legs as long as tree trunks. It clicked and hissed as it scuttled towards them, its enormous fangs gleaming in the dim light. Raylan instinctively took a step back, though the chains kept him rooted to the spot. Okay, I think I'm officially freaked out, Raylan muttered, struggling to hold his composure. Solara looked at the creature with a bored expression. You're not going to outrun it. And you're not going to fight it, at least, not in those chains. She paused, then added with a smirk. But you might be able to distract it. Raylan shot her a bewildered look. Distract it? How? Solara's smirk deepened. Well, if you're good at breaking things, Raylan, maybe you can break its focus. Think of it as a little game. He narrowed his eyes. A game? You've got to be kidding me. Not kidding, Solara replied, her voice dropping low. But I'm not going to do it alone. Raylan's frustration bubbled up again. This is the worst game I've ever played in my life. The spider creature hissed louder, drawing closer. Raylan didn't have time to argue. He pulled at his chains again, this time trying to use the tree as leverage to break free. The metal didn't budge. The creature was closing in, its red eyes locked on Raylan. He shot a glance at Solara. You have any brilliant ideas yet, or should I just take a chance and run for it? Solara didn't answer immediately. Instead, she stepped forward, her eyes narrowing as she studied the creature. Then, with a swift motion, she raised her hand, and a strange pulse of energy rippled through the air. Raylan watched in awe as the spider creature suddenly stopped in its tracks, confused. Its head twitched in the direction of Solara, its eyes flashing with anger and curiosity. It's not about brute force, she explained, her voice calm despite the situation. It's about knowing when to use the right force. Raylan blinked in confusion. What does that mean? Before Celara could respond, she raised both hands, and a wave of psychic energy surged toward the creature. It howled and recoiled, disoriented by the blast. The jungle trembled with the force of the energy, and for a moment, everything seemed frozen in place. No, Celara said, her eyes still glowing faintly. You run. Raylan barely had time to react. He took off, sprinting as fast as he could, dragging the chains behind him. He could hear the creature roaring in frustration, its enormous legs pounding the ground behind him. He glanced over his shoulder, but Celara was already moving in a way he couldn't follow. She was faster than he'd anticipated, a blur of motion weaving in and out of the jungle. Her psychic abilities kept the creature off balance, but Raylan knew it wouldn't hold forever. The chains were an anchor around his wrists, dragging him down with every step. He cursed, trying to shake them loose. Of course, I can't just run like a normal human being, he muttered under his breath. But then, something in him clicked. He remembered Celara's words, it's not about brute force. He wasn't going to escape by fighting or pulling harder on the chains. No, this was about using what he had, working with the situation instead of against it. He slowed down just a little, shifting his focus from trying to break the chains to finding a way to use them to his advantage. He glanced around, his mind racing. The jungle was thick with vines and strange, glowing plants. The spider beast was still behind him, but the psychic pulses Celara sent out were keeping it confused, at least for now. Raylan spotted a thick vine hanging from a nearby tree. With a grunt, he grabbed hold of it and used it to swing himself onto a nearby ledge. The chains rattled, but they didn't stop him. He leapt from one ledge to another, the strange energy in the air almost giving him a strange sense of power. He was gaining ground. The creature's roars grew distant, its pursuit slowing as it tried to navigate the dense foliage. I can't believe I'm doing this, Raylan muttered to himself, adrenaline coursing through his veins. His plan was risky, but it was the only chance he had. He swung once more, this time using the chains as leverage to propel himself higher. As he soared through the air, he felt the chains snap against the branches around him, the weight of them finally making them feel less like a hindrance and more like a tool. He could almost hear Celara's voice in his head, you have to use what's around you. Raylan landed lightly on a high branch, momentarily feeling a sense of victory. The creature, now far below him, couldn't reach him. But he wasn't out of danger yet. The jungle was full of more traps, more surprises, and the Varkalians, whoever they were still watching. He glanced over at Celara, who had caught up with him, looking remarkably unruffled. Not bad for a human, she said with a smile. I didn't expect you to figure it out that fast. Raylan looked down at the jungle below, breathing heavily. Yeah, well, I don't do well with being someone else's entertainment. Celara's smile faded slightly, her eyes serious. Neither do I. Raylan nodded. All right. What's next? Her lips curled into a sly grin. Now we find a way out. For the first time since waking up in the jungle, Raylan felt a flicker of hope. This wasn't over yet. Raylan took a moment to catch his breath, the tension from their narrow escape slowly melting away. His legs were sore, his arms still aching from the chains, but the adrenaline was enough to keep him moving. He glanced over at Celara, who seemed to be studying the jungle with a calm expression. It was hard to understand how someone could be so composed, especially after what they'd just gone through. But maybe that was why she was still alive. Maybe it was because she knew how to handle herself in a place like this. Celara's gaze met his, and she gave him a knowing look. You're going to need more than just chains to survive here, Raylan, she said, her voice steady. The jungle doesn't just test you physically. It tests your mind. Raylan raised an eyebrow. You're not going to start with some cryptic wisdom, are you? He asked, trying to lighten the mood. But beneath his sarcasm, there was a twinge of nervousness. The jungle was getting to him. He wasn't sure how much longer he could keep it together. Celara shrugged, her posture still relaxed. I'm just saying, you're going to need to think fast if we're going to get out of here. She took a step closer, her eyes scanning the thick trees ahead. And we're not out of danger yet. Not by a long shot. Raylan followed her gaze, his eyes scanning the foliage. He could feel the weight of the jungle pressing in on him, as if it were alive, waiting for him to make a mistake. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up. He hated the feeling of being watched. So, what's the plan? He asked, his voice tinged with impatience. You've got me this far. But I can't exactly do much with these chains. He shook them for emphasis, the metal clinking in the quiet air. Celera didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached up and touched her wrist chains, her fingers lightly grazing the metal. I've been here longer than you, Raylan. I know what the jungle can do to you if you're not careful. She turned her gaze back to him. But I also know how to make it work for me. Raylan watched her for a moment, trying to figure out if she was just toying with him, or if she genuinely knew something he didn't. He wasn't sure he was ready to trust her completely. But for now, he didn't have a choice. She was his best chance of survival. All right, so what's your genius plan, then? He asked, trying to keep the sarcasm out of his voice. Celera smiled slightly, the corners of her mouth curving upward. I'm not going to tell you just yet, she said, her tone teasing. But I'll give you a hint, it's not about breaking free from these chains. It's about using them. Raylan's eyes narrowed. What do you mean, using them? Celera's smile deepened. You're not the only one who can think on his feet. Watch and learn. Before Raylan could respond, Celera stepped forward, her chains rattling as she moved. She raised her hands, her fingers tracing the air as if conducting an invisible symphony. Raylan watched in awe as the chains around her wrists began to glow faintly, a soft hum of energy radiating from them. It was like watching magic in motion, except this wasn't magic. This was something else entirely. The chains shifted, the metal bending and warping in ways Raylan couldn't understand. He blinked, sure he was imagining things, but no, there it was. The chains around her wrists twisted and reformed, reshaping into something entirely new. Celera looked back at him, her expression almost smug. You see? Sometimes it's not about brute force. Sometimes it's about bending the rules. Raylan stared at her, his mouth slightly agape. What the hell? How did you do that? Celera shrugged, as though she were explaining something simple. It's just a matter of knowing how to manipulate the energy in the chains. It's something I've learned to do over time. It's all about understanding how to bend the materials to your will. Raylan was still trying to process what he'd just seen. That's incredible, he said, shaking his head. And here I was thinking I'd just need a big rock to smash these things. Celera smirked, clearly enjoying his reaction. Big rocks won't help you here, Raylan. Not when you're dealing with a jungle like this. Raylan paused, his mind racing. She was right. It wasn't just about strength. It wasn't just about trying to fight his way out of this. If he was going to survive, he needed to think differently. He needed to start thinking like Celera, smart, resourceful, adaptable. He looked at his own chains again, wondering if there was any way to manipulate them the way she had. But before he could try anything, Celera held up a hand, cutting off his thoughts. Not yet, she said, her voice calm. The jungle is full of tricks. It won't be as easy as just getting rid of the chains. We'll need to work together, figure out how to use the jungle to our advantage. Raylan nodded slowly. All right, so what now? He asked, his tone more serious now. He wasn't sure what they were up against, but he knew they had to stick together if they had any hope of getting out of this alive. Celera's eyes glinted with something almost mischievous. Now, she said, her voice low. We learn how to play the jungle's game. And just like that, the air seemed to shift. Raylan could feel the weight of her words, the gravity of their situation settling in. This wasn't just about surviving in some alien jungle. This was about outsmarting the jungle itself, using its own tricks against it. They weren't going to just escape. They were going to make the jungle work for them. Raylan had no idea what kind of twisted game they were playing, But one thing was certain, Solara was right. It wasn't about breaking chains. It was about breaking the jungle itself. And if that meant using everything at his disposal, his chains, his wit, his instinct, then so be it. They were going to survive. Together. He turned to Solara, his face set in determination. Let's do this. She gave him a brief nod, then turned toward the jungle, her eyes scanning the dense foliage ahead. Raylan followed her lead, his own mind now focused and sharp. Whatever was coming next, he was ready. He wasn't going to let this jungle win. Not today. Raylan felt the weight of the chains around his wrists, the cold metal pressing against his skin as he moved alongside Solara through the thick, oppressive jungle. The air was humid, sticky, and alive with the sounds of strange creatures in the distance. Every step felt like it might be his last, but Solara moved with a calm that seemed almost unnatural. It was as if the jungle had no power over her, as if it was just another game, another challenge to overcome. They hadn't spoken much since their last encounter with the massive spider creature, but the silence between them wasn't uncomfortable. Raylan knew they were both focused, thinking ahead. Solara had said the jungle wasn't just a test of physical strength, it was a test of the mind. And now, as they pushed forward, Raylan realized just how true that was. The jungle seemed to shift around them, the trees growing thicker, the ground uneven, the very air heavier. Raylan's mind raced, trying to figure out what Solara meant by playing the jungle's game. It wasn't just about avoiding the beasts or breaking the chains. It was more than that. There was something else, something beneath the surface of this alien world that he couldn't quite grasp. "You're quiet," Solara finally said, breaking the silence. Her voice was casual, but there was an edge to it, as though she was waiting for him to ask the right question. "I'm thinking," Raylan replied, his gaze flicking to the dense undergrowth ahead. "About what you said. About the jungle. What's the deal with it?" Solara's eyes flickered briefly to him before returning to the path ahead. "It's alive, in a way. Not like a creature, but, like the entire ecosystem is aware of you. It watches. It tests. It reacts." Raylan scoffed lightly. "So now we're fighting the planet itself?" Solara didn't laugh, but there was a hint of amusement in her voice. "Not exactly. You'll see. The jungle doesn't just respond to brute force. It responds to the way you approach it. If you force your way through, it'll throw something at you. If you try to outsmart it, it'll find a way to outsmart you right back. The key is understanding it. Adapting." Raylan chewed on her words, but the weight of the chains still weighed heavily on him. He was beginning to get the feeling that this was about more than just survival. It was about something else. Something deeper. "Right," he muttered. "And how do I get the jungle to like me?" "You don't," she replied simply. "You don't make the jungle like you. You make it fear you. You make it think that you're not someone to mess with." Raylan shot her a sidelong glance. "I think I'm starting to see why you're still alive." Solara didn't respond, but there was a glint of something in her eyes, something that told Raylan she knew exactly what she was doing. She was always 2 steps ahead. And that's what kept her alive. They walked in silence for a while, each step taking them deeper into the heart of the jungle. The air grew heavier, more oppressive, and Raylan could feel his patience wearing thin. Every rustling of the leaves made him jump. Every snap of a twig sent his pulse racing. "You're on edge," Solara observed, her voice breaking the silence again. "I'm not on edge," Raylan retorted, though he couldn't hide the tension in his voice. "Just aware." She gave him a look, her lips twitching into a half-smile. "Sure, whatever you say. But here's the thing, Raylan, the more you panic, the more the jungle can sense it. It's not about keeping calm for the sake of calm. It's about not letting it get to you. Control your fear, and the jungle will start to lose its hold on you." Raylan clenched his jaw, trying to suppress the unease gnawing at him. He wasn't used to feeling so vulnerable, so out of control. He had always been the one calling the shots. Always the one who knew how to manipulate a situation. But here, in this alien jungle, things were different. He was at the mercy of forces he didn't even understand. I don't know if I can control it, Raylan admitted, his voice low. This whole place, it's messing with my head. Celara stopped walking for a moment, turning to face him. Her expression softened, but there was still that steely resolve in her eyes. The jungle is just like anything else. It reacts to your emotions. If you let it control you, it will. But if you take control, if you show it that you're not afraid, it will back off. Raylan took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. It sounded easy enough, but he knew it wasn't. The jungle was alive with danger, and he had no idea what was lurking around the corner. He could hear the soft hum of the creatures in the distance, the constant rustle of leaves. It felt like the entire jungle was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Just then, a loud roar broke through the quiet, sending a shockwave of fear through his chest. Raylan's heart pounded in his ears as the sound echoed through the trees. This time, it wasn't a distant growl. It was close. Celara turned toward him, her eyes sharp. Stay close. And don't panic. Before Raylan could respond, Celara was already moving, her movements fluid and purposeful. She was leading them through the underbrush, her eyes scanning every movement, every shadow. Raylan followed instinctively, his senses heightened. The roar came again, closer this time. He felt the familiar rush of panic rise in his chest, but he forced it back, focusing on Celara's movements. She was calm, unbothered, and that helped steady him. He couldn't afford to lose control now. They moved quickly, but silently, weaving between the dense trees and thick vines. The jungle around them seemed to close in, but Celara kept her pace steady. Raylan could feel the ground shifting beneath his feet, the weight of the jungle pressing down on him. But he kept his mind focused, his movements deliberate. Suddenly, a large shape loomed ahead, a hulking, insect-like creature with glowing eyes and multiple legs, blocking their path. It was a terrifying sight, but Celara didn't flinch. She stood tall, her posture relaxed, as if she had seen this creature 1,000 times before. Raylan, on the other hand, froze. His heart skipped a beat. The creature's eyes locked onto him, and its mandibles clicked menacingly. Do not panic, Celara said, her voice calm but firm. You need to show it you're not afraid. Raylan nodded, though his stomach churned. He stepped forward, keeping his eyes locked on the creature. He could feel the jungle watching, the silence hanging thick between them. It was a standoff. And he had to win. He exhaled slowly, trying to push past the fear creeping into his chest. Slowly, he raised his hands, palms open, facing the creature. He wasn't sure if this was the right move, but it was all he had. The creature hesitated, its eyes narrowing. It wasn't sure what to make of him. Raylan stood firm, his body tense but not panicked. After what felt like an eternity, the creature snorted and slowly backed away, retreating into the jungle. Raylan let out a breath he didn't realize he had been holding. He turned to Celara, who was watching him with a slight nod of approval. You did well, she said quietly. But don't get too comfortable. This is just the beginning. Raylan wiped the sweat from his brow, trying to hide the relief flooding through him. I'm starting to think this jungle's got a sick sense of humor. Celara smirked. It does. But it also respects strength. You've just earned a little bit of it. Raylan couldn't help but grin. I'm not done yet. Good, Celara replied. Because this jungle hasn't seen anything yet.